Respecting and loving our parents at home. When our parents call us, we should answer them right away. When they tell us to do something, we should do it promptly. When our parents instruct us, we should listen respectfully. When they scold us, we should sincerely accept what they say. When we were babies, our parents gave up doing many of the things they enjoyed doing. Instead of going to bed when they wanted to and sleeping through the night, they got up every few hours to take care of us. Instead of going out to dinner with friends, they stayed home with us. Long vacations, leisurely weekends, doing what they wanted whenever they wish, all were put on hold. Even as we became older, they would put aside their own activities to take care of us. When we got sick, they would stay home to take care for us. When they had to make a choice on how to spend their money, they thought of us first. Our parents did their best for us, so we owe them a lot. The best way to thank them is to try to make them happy by doing what they have taught us to do. For example, when they call us, we should answer them right away. They may want to show us the neighbor's new puppy or teach us how to bake chocolate chip cookies. Or it could be an emergency and they may need us to do something urgent right away. When our parents tell us to do something, we need to do it the first time they ask us. If mom tells us to put away our toys or to turn off the computer, we need to do it right away. Or when dad tells us to take out the trash or to feed the dog, we need to do that promptly also. And while we are doing what they ask, we shouldn't argue with them or grumble to ourselves. What about when our parents scold us? We need to remember that they really are doing it for our own good. It would be much less stressful for them if we did things properly and without having to be corrected. But they do correct us because they want us to be good children and responsible adults. Also, they want us to set good habits, knowing that good habits will build our character and help us to be more happy and self-confident. So when our parents scold us, we shouldn't become upset. Instead, we should remember that they are scolding us to help us. We should listen respectfully to what they tell us. Taking their advice to heart, we should tell them that we will try to do better the next time. As for why we should answer and come when our parents call us, let's see how Felicia and Hannah learned why this is so important in A Missed Opportunity. Ever since they last visited Graham, their grandmother, Felicia and Hannah had been pleading with their mother to teach them to make chocolate chip cookies. It was a secret family recipe, and Graham always baked them because she knew how much her two granddaughters loved them. Graham had taught their mother, Mrs. Johansson, how to bake the cookies, but Mrs. Johansson had been very busy with work, so there hadn't been any time for baking lessons for her daughters. Fortunately, the project at work was now completed, and Mrs. Johansson decided that she would teach her daughters this Saturday, just like that day when her own mother taught her. Wanting to surprise them, she bought the chocolate chips and other special ingredients and put everything away where they wouldn't see them. On Saturday afternoon, she called to the girls, "Felicia and Hannah, come to the kitchen." Hannah, who was younger, came quickly, but Felicia was busy texting her friends and called out, "In a minute, Mom." Hannah's eyes grew big as she learned that today was the day. Excited, she helped her mother get out all the ingredients and cooking utensils. Her mother showed her how to carefully measure the ingredients and then mix everything together. Mrs. Johansson called out again, "Felicia, please come to the kitchen." Felicia gave a distracted "coming" and continued texting. Remembering her favorite part of helping her own mother, Mrs. Johansson told Hannah she could lick the spoon after the cookies were mixed. They opened a bag of imported chocolate chips, but Felicia still hadn't come to the kitchen. Mrs. Johansson smiled as she and Hannah sampled a few of the chips to be sure they are good. Then they ate a few more because they are good. Once again, Mrs. Johansson called out, "Felicia," but she couldn't even hear Felicia's mumbled reply. Mrs. Johansson turned on the oven. She and Hannah spooned the cookie dough onto the baking pans and put the first one in the oven. While the cookies were baking, Mrs. Johansson got out the cups and saucers she used on special occasions. Then she and Hannah made some hot chocolate and dropped a marshmallow into each cup. As they were sipping the hot chocolate, the aroma of the baking cookies began to fill the kitchen. Hannah listened as her mother told her about how she had helped Graham bake cookies. Hannah loved hearing stories about her grandmother and mother because her mother was always so happy when she told them. She told Hannah, "When you are grown up, you too will remember this very special day." Then Mr. Johansson came in. "Wow, it's chocolate day. I could smell your cookies out in the yard. Are they ready yet? I'm always hungry for your mother's chocolate chip cookies." As he pulled out a chair at the table, Mrs. Johansson poured him a cup of steaming hot chocolate and then took out the first tray of cookies. As the three were sitting at the table eating the warm, gooey cookies and drinking their hot chocolate, Felicia came in. "I'm sorry, Felicia, but I called you several times." Seeing the cookies, Felicia realized that she had missed something she had been looking forward to for weeks. Reaching for a cookie and a hot chocolate her mother poured for her, Felicia said, "Next time you call, I promise I'll come right away." We should make sure that our parents are warm in the winter and cool in the summer. In the morning, we should greet them and show them that we care. At night, we should make sure that they are resting comfortably. Just as our parents look after us, think how nice it would be if we do the same for them. We do not have to do anything major. We can do small things to show that we are concerned for their comfort. These will let our parents know that we appreciate all the ways they look after us. In the summer, we might bring our parents a cool drink or open the window if there is a breeze outside. We could close the curtains to keep the sunlight from making the room too hot. In the winter, we can find their slippers or bring them a cup of tea and a warm throw for them to put over their shoulders or on their lap. When we greet our parents in the morning, we can give them a hug to let them know we love them and ask if they have slept well. In the evening, we can ask if there is anything they would like before we say goodnight. Throughout our lives, there will be many ways that we can show our parents how much we appreciate all they have done for us. Just as they have looked after us all this while, we may have and should cherish the opportunity to look after them when they are much older. Before going out, we should let our parents know. When we return, we should tell them we are back. We should lead a routine life, and we should not be constantly changing our mind in whatever we do. Our parents worry about us, regardless of whether we're young children or grown adults. So when we're going out, we need to tell them. We also should let them know where we're going, who we'll be with, and when we'll return. And later, when we come home, we should also let them know. Imagine if you have a kitten or a puppy, and you cannot find it anywhere in the house or yard. Just like your mom and dad worrying about you, you'll be very worried that something has happened to your kitten or puppy. You might be scared they had gotten lost or maybe even been hurt. In the same way, our parents worry about us. Also, it is good to have a regular routine, getting up at a certain time, going to school or work when older, having dinner with our family, or doing homework before doing other things. Having a regular routine will mean we don't have to figure out what to do every day and when to do it. As for changing our mind, doing so for a good reason can be fine, but constantly changing it without thinking of the possible consequences can create a lot of problems, even if you're a cat living in a barn. Mrs. Black Whiskers Gray's new home. Mrs. Black Whiskers Gray lived in a barn with her 3 little kittens. One was an orange tabby, one was solid green, and one pink with black spots. All 3 had their mother's beautiful pink nose and sweet smile. The 3 little kittens were very happy in the barn, which was filled with hay that smelled wonderfully sweet and fresh. The hay provided many secret hiding places in which to play. Their mother lovingly took care of them and taught them what they needed to know to live safely in the world. She told them all about the house she visited every morning for her breakfast. And she also taught them about the other animals who lived on the farm. One day, Mrs. Black Whiskers Gray returned to the barn and told them she had found a better home. Before they knew what was happening, she took them one by one to their new home, a big basket with lots of clothes in it that was on the back porch of the house. But that night, there was a terrible storm with wind and thunder and lightning. The kittens cried all night long, and the next morning, their mother told them she was very sorry for taking them away from the barn. When the sun came out and all the puddles had dried up, she carried them back one by one to the barn. Then after several days, she came into the barn and told them excitedly that now she had really found a better home. This time, she took them to the shed where the chickens lived. She told her 3 kittens they would have fun playing with the baby chicks. But that night, when all the chickens came in to go to sleep, there were so many of them that there was no space left for the 3 little kittens to lie down. All that was left was a battered old egg carton on the floor of the shed. Uncomfortable and cold, the kittens cried unhappily for some time until, exhausted, they finally fell asleep. The next day, their mother once again carried them one by one back to the barn. When they were all together again, she apologized and said she wouldn't change her mind again about where they would live. Comforted by this assurance, the kittens began to happily play again in the hay. But only a week had passed when Mrs. Black Whiskers Gray came running into the barn excited again. Being a little older and a lot wiser now, Orange Tabby looked at Green and Green looked at Pink. You could tell they were all nervous. Their mother said this time she had found a very special home and she was sure they loved it. Being very dutiful and loving their mother a great deal, the kittens didn't protest. So again, their mother moved them, this time to the back seat of an old car that wasn't used anymore. But that night, the family's big black and white dog jumped onto the front seat, and even though he smiled as much as he could and gently assured the little kittens that he wouldn't hurt them, they were still scared. After all, he was so big and seemed to fill the entire front seat. They huddled together and shook in terror until they finally fell asleep under the watchful eye of their mother, who stayed awake all night thinking. The next morning, she explained that they were her first kittens, so she was still learning how to be a good parent. She now knew that making many changes without good planning and careful thought could cause serious problems. Then she carried them back to the cozy corner in the hay barn where they had been so happy and safe and comfortable. And never again did Mrs. Black Whiskers Gray casually change her mind. Constantly changing our minds can create a lot of trouble. Even when a matter is trivial, we should not act without permission or just do as we please. If we do so, then we are no longer a dutiful child. We should not hide any possession, no matter how small, from our parents. If we do, they will feel hurt. We may think something is too minor to bother asking our parents about, but it's still best to check with them before proceeding with something new. And as for hiding things from our parents, if we do so, they will feel hurt. Instead, we need to share whatever we have with our family. 2 brothers and 1 umbrella. Once upon a time, there were 2 brothers. The younger one had an important job in the city, so he liked to wear the business hat he had bought on a visit to London. But since the hat, which the shop owner had called a derby, was brown, He liked to wear his red jacket with it to liven things up. The other brother always wore French berets. His favorite was a purple one that went with his purple pants. Purple was his favorite color since he loved to drink French wine made from purple grapes. He was very proud of being French and never, ever, ever wanted to go to London. Also, he worked in a local village, so he didn't need to look like a businessman. Even though they dressed differently, the two brothers lived happily together in the same house. In fact, their parents lived with them, and the four enjoyed the arrangement immensely. One morning, it began to rain very hard. The brother who worked in the city suddenly realized he had forgotten to bring his umbrella home the day before. He needed to go to work, but he didn't want to get his brown derby and red jacket wet. The brother who worked in the village said he understood. After all, he would not want to get his purple beret and pants wet either. The two brothers looked at each other. The parents looked at both their sons. The brothers looked at their parents. Then everyone turned together to look at the sole umbrella in the stand by the front door. And there they all stood thinking. The brother who worked in the village went into the kitchen and got a pair of scissors. He came back to the stand by the front door and said that his brother was more important to him than his umbrella. Luckily, his umbrella was orange and not purple, or things might have turned out very differently. He carefully cut the big orange umbrella in half. Realizing what his brother was thinking, the brother who worked in the city took a cane that was also in the stand and with some string connected the cane to the half of the umbrella that had been cut off. The two brothers smiled at their new styled umbrellas and agreed that if they both tipped their umbrellas just a little bit, both would manage to stay dry. The parents beamed in approval at the selflessness of their two sons. The brothers opened the door and walked down the front path. At the sidewalk, they turned to wish each other a good day. The brother in the brown derby and red jacket turned left to go to the train station to catch the 8:15 express to the city. The brother in the purple beret and pants turned right to walk to the village. Their parents waved goodbye and went back inside the house hand in hand. They smiled to each other with the knowledge that their lessons on sharing had paid off. Sharing makes everyone happy. Our parents are models of good behavior for us. They have taught us what is right and what is wrong. But there may come a time when what they ask goes against what we know to be proper and good. When this happens, we can try to let them know how we feel while remembering that we need to do so respectfully. If we talk to them calmly, we will have a much better chance of moving them and changing their behavior. Let's see how a girl named Gentle did just this. How Auntie Faye helped her parents. Long ago, there lived a girl called Auntie Faye, which means gentle. Her parents and named her this because as a newborn baby she was very sweet. They marveled at her good nature. Auntie Faye lived with her family in a beautiful valley. As did most people, the family had some sheep. They also had a large gray ram. It was his job to look out for the herd and protect them from danger. Auntie Faye's father cut the wool from the sheep every year for her mother to spin and to make into beautiful clothing and blankets. As Auntie Faye grew up, she began to help her parents around the farm. She helped clean the house and water the plants and brought things when her parents asked for them. She also loved to feed grass to the baby sheep in the springtime. As she played, she delighted in the butterflies and the birds and the small animals. She would sit very quietly under a big cypress tree and wait for them to come to her. When they did, she would feed them crumbs from the bread her mother baked. Not having any brothers or sisters, she regarded the birds and animals as her family and cared for them as a big sister would a younger one. When Auntie Faye was about 5 years old, her mother told her it was time to start learning how to cook. Auntie Faye was very excited because she loved to eat her mother's delicious food, but had no idea how it was prepared or even what was in it. Her mother told her to ask her father for some carrots and potatoes from the garden. Auntie Faye happily went to her father to ask him for the vegetables. He smiled fondly down at her and pulled out some carrots and potatoes, put them into a small basket, and handed it to Auntie Faye. Carefully holding the basket, she walked back to the kitchen and with a smile handed it up to her mother. Then her mother asked her to get some of the herbs that grew outside the kitchen door. Auntie Faye went outside, picked the herbs, and brought them to her mother. Her mother beamed at her and said since Auntie Faye was learning to cook, she would teach her how to make a very special dish, lamb stew. But for this, they would need the special ingredient, which was lamb. She asked Auntie Faye to go and tell her father that she needed lamb. Auntie Faye went dutifully to her father and told him what her mother had said. Curious, she asked, "Father, what is lamb?" Her father knelt down on one knee so he could look directly into her eyes and softly replied, "A lamb is a baby sheep." Auntie Faye froze. She couldn't speak. She just looked at her father in shock. Then she very slowly shook her head and mouthed a silent no. She turned and ran back to the kitchen with her father following her. His gentle daughter had never said no to him before. Back in the kitchen, Auntie Faye was trembling and struggling to come up with just the right words. Finally, she looked at her mother and said, "Mother, when you wanted the carrots and the potatoes, I was happy to get them for you. But when you wanted the herbs, I brought those to you as well. But to kill is wrong. You and Father have always taught me to care for animals and never to harm them. As much as I want to be a good daughter, I cannot because I will not tell Father to kill a sheep." Then Auntie Faye stopped talking. She turned her eyes downward and stared at the floor. She was expecting a scolding, for surely her parents would be very angry at her refusal to do what she was told. Instead, her parents were speechless, shocked that their gentle daughter had spoken so strongly. They looked at each other and both realized what else would a girl named Gentle do? They thought about what she had said. Atife's mother sat down on a chair next to the table and took Atife in her arms. Smiling, she gently said, "We have always taught you to live up to your name, to care for all living beings, and to respect everything around us." "Atife, you are right. Killing is wrong. From now on, the sheep will give us their wool, but not their lives. We will not kill any more sheep." That night, Atife went to the ram to tell him good night. He was standing on a small hill, watching over the sheep, just as a guardian does. She reported to him what had happened. In his eyes, she saw deep gratitude. For many years after that, Atife would go to say good night to the ram, and he would look at her and offer a silent, "Good night, Atife, and thank you." When we talked respectfully and calmly, others will listen to us and consider what we are saying. When our parents love us, it is easy to be respectful and loving. When they do not love us, respecting and loving them means we have a noble heart. When our parents care for and are happy with us, it's natural for us to return their love and to be good. It's like giggling or laughing. When others laugh, we often end up laughing along with them. And we all know what happens when someone starts giggling. Loving our parents when they love us is as easy and as natural. But what if our parents are angry about something? Maybe something we did. If we did something wrong, it is understandable if they get upset with us. Maybe they were scared for our safety or frustrated when we repeatedly did not do what they told us to do. But their anger is only a temporary emotion. By no means does it lessen their love for us. If we understand, we won't be upset. But by not understanding, we might well do something we regret later, like Peter did in Peter's misunderstanding. The winter had been long, but spring finally arrived. Peter could now run to greet his father at the front gate when he returned from work. His father would swing Peter up on his shoulders and grasp Peter's ankles as he held tight to his father's neck. They would head for the front porch where Peter's father would sit in his chair. Peter would curl up in his father's lap and tell him all about his day. But one day, when his father came home, he looked very unhappy. When Peter tugged at his hand and asked to be picked up, his father said sharply, "Go away, Peter, I'm thinking." Stung by his father's words, Peter decided he would do just that. He'd go away. After his father went into the house, Peter turned and ran out the front gate. Peter ran as far as he could and then slowed to a walk. Soon he came to the village. He was so tired that he had to sit down on a curb. Then he realized he was also hungry and cold. And worse, he began to think about his father, who must be getting worried about him. The next moment, Peter noticed a pair of shoes standing in front of him. They were not just any shoes. They were the ones the village policeman wore. A question floated down to him. "Son, are you okay? Are you waiting for someone?" Peter looked up and saw a policeman with a kind face and nice smile. Peter stood up and shyly admitted that he had run away from home. The policeman scrunched down to Peter's level. "You know, when I was about your age, I did the same thing. My parents had said something that hurt my feelings. It so surprised me that I found myself running away, and it was getting dark, and I was getting scared. Plus, I had no money and nowhere to go." "Yep, I remember it clearly," Peter exclaimed. "Just like me. Dad told me to go away." The policeman nodded. "I bet that surprised you." Peter mumbled, "Yes. You know, after I ran away, I felt miserable and wanted to go home. Are you, by any chance, thinking you like to go home?" the policeman asked with a reassuring smile. Peter said yes again, this time with a broad smile. The policeman asked Peter where he lived, and Peter told him. He replied, "I know where that is. I just moved close to there with my wife and a little girl. Would you like me to take you home?" Peter nodded enthusiastically. The policeman swung Peter up on his shoulders, and while holding firmly to Peter's ankles, told him to put his arms around his neck. Peter did so. After just a few steps, he heard Peter begin to cry. He put Peter down and scrunched down again. He asked Peter why he was crying. Peter said his father carried him the same way every day when he came home from work. The policeman smiled. "It sounds like you have a really good daddy. After working all day, the first thing he does when he comes home is to carry you proudly on his shoulders. You know, your dad probably had a really tough day today and was just feeling bad. And I'm sure he didn't really mean it when he told you to go away." Peter agreed. "Yes, he's a really great dad, but today he did look tired and unhappy. Now I made things even worse for him." The policeman chuckled. "Well, that's it then. You and your dad just had a misunderstanding." And with that, he again swung Peter up on his shoulders and continued walking until they could see the house Peter lived in. As the two approached the gate, Peter's father came running out to them. The policeman put Peter down. He ran to his father, who scooped him up, saying, "Peter, where have you been? I cooked dinner, but then I couldn't find you. I've been so worried." He then looked questioningly at the policeman, who winked and nodded in the direction of the village. He said, "Peter has been showing me around. My family and I just moved here." Peter's father quickly understood and said, "Ah, it's very nice that you've been talking to our new policeman. But Peter, you do know that you can talk to me anytime, right? Even when I'm tired or upset, okay?" Peter beamed at his father and nodded. They thanked the policeman, who began whistling as he turned to walk back to the village. Then Peter's father put Peter on his shoulders and held on to his ankles as Peter clung to his father's neck. Together they went in to dinner. Even if our parents are upset with us, we should try to help them be happy. If our parents do something wrong, we should urge them to change. Do so with a kind expression and caring voice. Should our parents not accept our advice, try again when they are in a better mood. If they still do not listen, our sincere tears will show them how deeply we care. Should they get angry with us, do not hold it against them. As we grow up, we learn from our parents what is right and what is wrong. For more importantly, they show us what is right by doing it. But one day, our parents may do something wrong. Knowing that even our parents can sometimes make mistakes, what can we do when this happens? We can respectfully talk to them. By remaining calm, we will have a good chance to help them. How might we do this? Read on to see how one little girl found a way to help her father. Someone is watching. Once, in the not-so-distant past, a man decided to take some apples from his neighbor. He thought, I'll only take a few. My neighbor will never miss them. And besides, he can't possibly use all those apples. He waited until it was dark to be sure he wasn't caught. He took Natasha, his youngest daughter, with him so she could keep watch and warn him if anyone approached. Walking very quietly, father and daughter went to the neighbor's orchard where there were many apple trees. The father reached up to the first tree and picked a few apples. He was about to put them into a basket he had brought along when his daughter said softly, Father, someone's watching. Her father immediately looked around but saw no one. He then went to another tree and picked a few more apples. His daughter tugged at his pants and a little louder this time said, Father, someone is watching. Again, he looked around nervously but saw no one. He picked up his basket and moved down the row of trees and reached up to pick a few more apples. He was just putting them into his basket when his daughter called out, Father, someone is watching. He was frustrated at looking around and seeing no one, but just to be safe, he moved deeper into the orchard where he was further away from the road. Even here, his daughter cried out to him, Father, someone is watching you. Again, he looked all around, but saw no one. Exasperated, he turned to his daughter and said, Why do you keep saying someone is watching? No one's here. His daughter looked up at him, her eyes glistening with rising tears, and said, I'm here. Moved by her concern, her father suddenly realized he had been setting a very bad example, and that his daughter had only been trying to help him realize that taking the apples was wrong. After all, he had always taught her that stealing was wrong, and here he was doing it. He hugged her to let her know that she was right, and what a good daughter she was. They walked home together, hand in hand. Along the way, they carefully put all the apples back under the trees. To help others see their mistakes, we need to speak politely and at the right time and away from others. When our parents are ill, we should make sure that they take the right medicine, care for them night and day, and do not leave them alone. For 3 years after our parents' passing, we should remember them in sadness. We should live simply and not adorn our home. avoid merrymaking, meat, and alcohol. We should arrange our parents' funeral in a proper manner. We should always honor them as if they were still alive, and especially on the anniversary of their death. Remember them with a sincere heart. If our parents don't feel well, we can help to look after them. We can bring them water or a hot drink if we are old enough to make it. We can make sure their room isn't too dark or too bright, and that they are comfortable. We can read to them or make sure they have some books next to their bed. Or we might bring them some fresh flowers from our garden, or even a bell to allow them to call us should they need something. Instead of going outside, we can do something in the house so that we can hear if they need us. But we need to be quiet if we are watching TV or playing on a computer. This will allow them to rest better. If it is time for our parents to take their medicine, we can bring it to them along with some water or crackers. When it is prescription medicine, we need to check very carefully that the container has their name on it. Giving a person the wrong medicine can make them very sick. Another way people take medicine is to use herbs. Since the herbs are brewed in water, it is very important to make sure that the drink is not too hot or too cold. Also, in some parts of the world, if a family is small and there are no relatives close by, children can find themselves having to take on adult responsibilities. They might be the only person available to look after sick parents or younger brothers and sisters, and they may even have to arrange for a parent's funeral. When our parents are no longer alive, we should continue to remember them with love and appreciation for all they have done for us. Try this out. Think of how many ways you could look after your mom or dad if they were not feeling well. Don't know what to do? Notice what they do for you the next time you are sick. By watching how your parents care for you, you can learn how to look after them should they not feel well sometime.